Hey everyone! In today's episode of the Python for Beginners series, we will be covering what floats, integers and strings are. If you already know what floats, integers and strings are, you can skip to the next episode. We won't be doing much coding, if any, in today's episode. More explaining. Okay, to begin, we will do strings. A string is a sequence of characters, letters, numbers, symbols, etc. So in regular use on Python, you may use a string in variables and functions. One function that commonly uses a string is the print function. The print function has been explained in past videos, but I will explain it again to remind you. The print function will output a variable, a string, an integer, and a float to the Python shell. This can be useful if you want to display something that the code executed on the user's end, or if you want to have a text-based game / software application. When using a print function for a sentence or words, you're outputting a string. Strings can also be connected by using a plus. This can be useful if you want to incorporate a string variable into a sentence. Now, although you can have numbers in a string, putting numbers in strings will mean you cannot use any math functions with the number. This is because Python does not care what's inside. To Python, it's just a symbol that has no meaning. Now obviously you know it's a number, but Python doesn't. To use numbers and math and random functions, you must make the number an integer or a float. I know what you're thinking. What are they? Well, it's pretty simple really. Let's start by explaining an integer. An integer is a whole number. With integers you cannot use decimals or fractions. Using these with an integer will cause an error. However, floats can come and save the day. A float is like an advanced integer. It can store decimal values and fractions, so it does not have to be a whole number. Okay, now let's talk about how to use each method. To use a string, you must put the characters into quotation marks like we've been doing in previous episodes. Here is an example of a string. And here is an example of a string where it can be used. Okay, so now you know how to write a string by using apostrophes. Let's have a look at floats and integers. A float. To write a float, you would write float, bracket 2.2, or whatever number you want, bracket. This forces Python to make that number into a float. However, often you will just put 2.2, because Python can automatically default it to a float. One example of when you might want to force the number to be a float is if you wanted it to be a float as a whole number, because by default Python will make whole numbers into integers. An example of a time when you would like a whole number as a float, maybe if you were trying to do decimal addition to a whole number. Obviously this cannot be done with integers, as they don't accept decimal places. Okay, so to write a float, you can put it in the brackets with float, or you can just write it out. So now you know how to write a float, let's have a look at integers. How to write an integer. An integer can be forced with int, bracket, number, bracket. However, Python will default the number to being an integer if it's a whole number, so you can just write 2, or whatever number you want. With using integers and floats, you can do addition, like 2 plus 2, but you can't do apostrophe 2, apostrophe, plus apostrophe 2, apostrophe, because those 2's are in strings. The numbers must be in integers or floats to do math. Okay, I think that's all we've got time for now. So, to recap, in this video we learned what floats, integers and strings were, and how and where they are used in Python coding. We also learnt the pros and cons of floats, strings and integers. Well, I hope I helped you learn some more Python. Come back for episode 4 to see loops, math and random integers. Bye!